So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Paris 21 Spring Meetings on Climate Change Data Ecosystems. If I can just pass over to François Fontenot, the Deputy Head of Paris 21, who will kick off the meeting this afternoon and give us a short recap of the meetings yesterday. Thank you, François, sorry.
Thank you, Cathy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second part of our Paris 21 Spring Meeting on data ecosystems for climate action. My name is François Fontenot, and I'm the Deputy Head of the Paris 21 Secretariat. I'm very happy to see that we are a big group again today, and a big group of different people who all play a different part in this conversation. Yesterday, we were more than 250 participants from about 75 countries worldwide. So a global attendance for a very global topic. To set the stage for today, let me briefly propose 3 highlights of what happened yesterday with our fantastic keynote panelists and speakers. First, Sonny Kapoor gave us a brilliant keynote where he stressed the complexity of the topic with all the interdependencies between geographical scales and sectors, and stressed the cost of no action. What I liked in particular was the calls he made for having data to guide investments. The good news is that you can hear more from Sonny, as we just launched a new podcast with him, and the colleagues will put a link on the chat. Second highlight is the launch of our paper from the Secretariat. I'm trying to put again the image here. You have a link on the chat. This paper is envisioning a climate change data ecosystem, which again, I encourage you to read and share around. Discussants yesterday stressed the relevance of the ecosystem lens, which is new to approach the topic. And we heard success stories from chief statisticians. We saw good practice from our UN and OECD colleagues, and also from data journalists. Last highlight, but not least, we got brilliant ideas from our panelists who all shared a piece of advice for this community looking forward. Antigua and Jamaica called for NSOs to continue to be user-centric, policy-driven, and to promote inclusiveness in their data processes. UNFCCC stressed the need to develop skills, to invest in literacy, and to promote sustainability of these efforts. And finally, GGGI stressed the need for financing and linked the effort of capacity development to financing. We also had great interactions with all of you through the question and answers. Please continue. We want this to be a discussion also on this second part. So what will happen today? We will hear some examples of both challenges and opportunities faced in developing systems for climate change data. The objective here is to increase our understanding of what works and what needs to be done in a very practical sense to drive change towards a more coherent data ecosystem approach for climate change data. We will start with one short keynote by UNSD. Then we will have 2 presentations by Norway and Indonesia together, and then by Paraguay. And then we will have a panel which Cathy will moderate. Again, we should have time for questions and answers. So please continue sending questions through the box. We want to hear from you, and please use this space to influence us and challenge the speakers. So let me turn to our first speaker today, which is Stefan Schreinfest, Director of the UN Statistics Division and key player and strong supporter of the Paris 21 Partnership. Stefan, most of us are aware that UNSD is doing an essential job in creating a healthy climate change data ecosystem. The recent adoption of the global set of climate change statistics and indicators in that sense is a major step forward. What fewer people here actually know is a personal story on you. And speaking of privacy on the internet, I will make it public. I learned that in 1994, you were actually working on this with Colombia, trying to put forward a coordination governance mechanism around climate change and environment data. As early as 1994, the time where myself had not even started university. So it's both a personal thing for you and a very institutional thing, climate change. And I think this dual position makes it very relevant for our discussion. The global versus country dimension of climate change as a topic and of associated data ecosystems was stressed again yesterday several times. We had, for example, a question on whether data stewardship at global level had any sense besides stewardship at country level. So you might want to share a bit of light and share your views on this topic in your speech. So with this, Stefan, the floor is yours for 10 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Francois, and hello everybody from, good morning from New York. I wish I could be there with your new format of the spring meeting. My way of being with you is I got my Paris cup out this morning, and everybody knows that I'm a coffee junkie, so I'm getting myself here in the mood to be with you. Reading, and thanks for dating me by telling the story of how many 100 years I've been working in this area. But of course, I mean, what you didn't add is that I started working in statistics when I was 5 years old. The title of your meeting is, of course, is a mouthful. I mean, data ecosystems, climate action, inclusive coordinated data approach. You could almost make a presentation on each of those important words: climate, action, data, ecosystems. I think perhaps the ecosystem part is perhaps the most innovative part. And that's where my story from 1994 fits in. I mean, it became, maybe the focus was there not so much yet on climate change, but after the 1992 Rio conference, it was clear that the environment had to be taken much more into account, quite literally. And I was a national accountant, and these were the early days of environmental accounting. And it was very clear that the regular usual suspects would not be sufficient to bring the data to the table, that we would need to have better information systems to manage the environmental challenges and the integrated environmental, economic, and I dare say social challenges, because of course we know everything is related with each other. Perhaps so building on that, let me tell you a little bit about what we have done, what the UN work is at this point, and I think how this initiative and our work fit very naturally together, and where I see opportunities to work very closely together in the coming months and years. So again, climate change is now one of the policy priorities, and I think it's very wise and timely that we focus on this topic. Our contribution, and when I say ours, it's not so much the UN Statistics Division, my team, my fantastic team in New York, it's the Statistical Commission, the community of chief statisticians that just met in March, as you know, and they determine our program, and they had a very central focus this year's commission on the adoption of the global set as a framework for climate change statistics and indicators. You mentioned it. I don't have to go into the details, but I think it is important to say that, as usual, when we do this normative work, it is built on global consultations. We have been spanning and asking all the regions in the world to provide inputs into this global set. That makes it sometimes a little bit bigger and a little bit more complicated and a bit more tedious. But our deep conviction is that, of course, if everybody has a seat at the table when we put these frameworks together, that they also become more anchored, more sustainable in the long run. Of course, we had all our partners, UNFCCC, and others at the table, because it's not only for national monitoring, it is also for global reporting of all, and we were trying to make explicit the links with other tools that we have already developed, like our environmental statistics framework and the system of economic environmental accounting, and the SDG indicators. Even though we are talking mostly about climate change and climate change indicators, let me just make quickly other connections that there is a lot more work in the Statistical Commission that is also relevant here. There's our work that we've been doing for 10 years on big data, asking ourselves the question which non-official data elements that are outside the official statistical mechanisms of census and survey taking and perhaps government administrative records are important to build national information systems. There's all our work on geospatial information and the integration with statistics, how all this whole big area of satellite imageries and geospatial information can actually be integrated with numerical statistics and provide a more comprehensive information system. And there is what you mentioned, the data stewardship, sort of the data governance kind of aspect of it is what is the new role of national statistical offices? They are no longer just the producing their classical information elements, but they are also the guardian of bringing everybody together in a country, convening a little bit the best information and make sure it flows together and it goes through the appropriate quality assurance procedures so that they are usable for policy decision making. So I think all of this is coming together very, very nicely. And this is why I'm so happy that you also in this event, in the spring meeting, focusing on this. Let me say just a few more words on the global set. I mean, where we are with it, it's out there. The perfect is the enemy of the good. We could have discussed this for another 10 years, but climate change does not wait, and we needed to start somewhere. So I'm very happy that the Commission accepted this philosophy that the global set is a starting point. We very clearly said it needs further methodological development, and we are working on that. There are different types of indicators in there. Some of them are much more developed than others. Others we need to do some fundamental work of better defining and explaining how you can actually compile this. There is a lot of capacity development to be done. This is now the proof is now really in the realization, and the idea of having the set continuously updated is also already written into the framework. So we work with our partners and especially UNFCCC to try to implement this now, and we are focusing in parallel on further methodological development. And for this we have the mechanism, which is our expert group on environment statistics and also our committee on environmental economic accounting. So there will be, on the one hand, there will be a two-track activity, a further development methodologically, but on the other hand, we really want to start implementing this and gain experiences at the country level. And this is where I see the big opportunity of working with PARIS21 and what you are doing right now. Because we need to develop assessment tools. I mean, a country needs to position itself vis-a-vis this indicator framework. We need to develop training materials, implementation guidelines, and organize events to publicize and popularize this framework so that it becomes a reality. We have already communicated with 88 countries from all regions who did an initial assessment of the global set and what it means for them. And of course, many countries immediately pointed to the challenges, which are perhaps in the initial stages twofold. One is setting up the national committees, whatever name we want to do it, you could give it, you said the ecosystem. But the question is, how do we get the right people together at a table that have bits and pieces of the information system? And how do we create an interaction, governance mechanism in our vision under the leadership of the national statistical offices, because they have the expertise in terms of data management and data quality assurance. But how do we get the right people together to talk to each other? And then the second practical aspect is, how do we organize the practical data exchange processes? Data are sitting often in different shapes and forms in different parts of the government and in different national institutions. And we have to make sure that the data talk to each other, that they flow together somewhere. And then we can go through our classical process of compiling the data, validating the data, and disseminating the data and making them use, because the ultimate proof is really in the use. So we are working hard on this. I think what we can do as global community is contributing the tools and interacting collectively with donors, and perhaps find a couple of countries that would be volunteering to be pilots. I think that would be really brilliant. And what countries would need to do is to prioritize and see what in their particular context are perhaps the first steps. I mean, we do not expect that the big framework, which is over 150 indicators, would be implemented immediately everywhere, but I think it would be very helpful if countries could define a segmentation process based on their policy priorities, what is really needed in the country, and based on their data ecosystem as it already exists, and then perhaps define their individual path. And I think that last reflection perhaps answers also one of the questions that I understand came up yesterday. What is it versus? It's always the same question: national versus global. On the one hand, all of our tools should be nationally specific so that they address the needs of countries. On the other hand, all of our problems are increasingly global, so we need to understand each other across borders. We need to be able to aggregate and say what is happening in a particular region of the world, what is happening on the entire planet in terms of climate change in particular. So we need to aggregate the data, and for that, they need to be comparable. So there is a bit of a tension. I think the way to resolve it is to agree on a global vision. I think we hope we have done that, where everybody is striving towards. So if you do it, if you work on this part, you do it this way, and we all do it the same way. And as I said, if each country, based on its own prioritizations, defines a path to compiling more and more and more elements of the framework, I'm confident that we will get both the information that is relevant at the national level, and we will be able to put increasingly together the information that is relevant at the global level, aggregating all this information. So I hope with this short panoramic flight of where we are, as UN, where we are planning to go in the next couple of months and years, and where I see enormous opportunities of effective partnership is helpful. And if there are any questions, I'm certainly happy to address them, and I'll look in the question and answer mechanism and try to address any specific questions, because I understand that there are so many other interesting presentations to come. So I don't want to take their time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Stefan. This was super, super useful, providing both the vision for the future and practical leads, ways to get there. As you said, I see questions coming to you, and if you can stay with us a bit more time after the two country presentations, you'll have the chance to react to some of them. So thanks again. And let me turn now to our two country presentations. I think Stefan told us climate change does not wait. We have to start from somewhere. And that's exactly what we want to hear from the two examples. So we'll hear first from a technical assistance partnership between Norway and Indonesia. And for this, I'm asking three colleagues to please take the floor, and let me present them briefly. We have Mrs. Ria Arinda, who is a statistician from Statistics Indonesia, and apologies for mispronouncing your name. And this will go also for the two next panelists. We have also Mrs. Tarik Ogba-Michael, who's a senior advisor from Statistics Norway, and Mrs. Kristin Grimsrud, who's a senior researcher at Statistics Norway as well. You have the floor. I'm not sure who starts, but the floor is yours for 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Good morning, good evening for some of our listeners. My name is Tarik Ogba-Michael, and I'm a project coordinator at the Division for International Development Cooperation in Statistics Norway. Our main purpose is to contribute to the development of strong national statistical systems and an increase in the production of high quality statistics, often referred to as capacity building. A key element in this cooperation that we're talking about today is ocean accounting that reflects the true value of the ocean. And the information that is compiled in a complete set of ocean accounts can contribute to knowledge-based solutions when society has to trade off economic interest against environmental interests, such as mitigating climate change. As the work of developing complete ocean accounts is still on an early stage in both countries, but at least we started, the potential for synergies is high. And I will argue that we are engaged in a new form of peer-to-peer learning, deviating a little from the traditional way of doing capacity building. We really use each other's comparative advantage in this cooperation, in this groundbreaking work. Next slide, please. Yeah, so you see the agenda here. I'm not taking up much time, but before I give the word to my Indonesian and Norwegian subject matter expert colleagues, I will just give you a very brief introduction to the rationale of our cooperation with Indonesia under the Ocean for Development program. Next, please. Yeah. So the Ocean for Development program was launched by our previous Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg in October 2019 to reinforce Norway's development cooperation on ocean management. It is one of Norway's contributions to achieving Sustainable Development Goal 14, conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development, and of course to the broader United Nations 2030 agenda. And both Indonesia and Norway are members of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, making them very committed to improve the management of the ocean. So for the time being, Statistics Norway has started the planning of a statistics subcomponent with Indonesia Institute of Statistics and the Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. So we have been engaged in several digital meetings throughout 2021 and continued this in 2022. Potential areas of collaboration between SSB and our Indonesian partners will be further developed, but we continue to learn a lot from each other during these technical meetings, and we have identified areas of cooperation, which you will hear a little about now, between Indonesia's practical experience on ocean accounting and Norway's research on testing how ecosystem accounting methods can provide decision support. And with that said, I want to give the word over to my Indonesian partner, Ms. Ria Arinda. So next slide, please.
Okay, hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from my other side of the world. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ria Arinda. I'm a statistician in Statistics Indonesia. In this special occasion, I'd like to share Indonesia's experience in compiling ocean account. Next slide, please. So as one of the world's largest archipelago, Indonesia has started to include its oceans into the development plan. That is why the necessity of owning ocean accounts in Indonesia has been expanding. Our National Development Planning Agency, we call it BAPNAS, has set a goal of effectively putting an end to the unsustainable use of marine resources. However, it's still difficult to say whether such objective has been met because Indonesia still lacks government records of its marine resources data. In addition, we also keep supporting SDG Target 14, and there is also a need to evaluate the maritime sectors and activities contribution to the Indonesian economy. So that is why in this slide, you can see that our National Development Planning Agency, again, BAPNAS, has set one of our national development priority programs to be improving the availability and quality of marine data and information, one of which is through the development of ocean account. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the ocean accounts framework. We built the ocean accounts based on Ocean Accounting for Sustainable Development Detailed Technical Guidance, as it is recommended by the GOA, or Global Ocean Accounts Partnership. And it is very fortunate for us that last year, Indonesia has managed to compile the first 3 accounts of this framework. So last year in 2021, 5 institutions, including Statistics Indonesia, managed to collaborate in compiling ocean accounts. And the activity was carried out as a pilot study in a marine protected area called Gilimatra MPA, in which the output was the first account of this framework, namely the asset accounts of Gilimatra MPA. The result were the Gilimatra ecosystem extent account, Gilimatra condition account, and also economic value of ecosystem services that provided by Gilimatra MPA. In the same year, we also managed to compile ocean flow accounts, which consists of flow to economy and flow to environment accounts. The activity was carried out as an in-depth study in 17 provinces in Indonesia, or half of the total provinces in Indonesia, in which we managed to generate physical supply and use of ocean natural inputs, and then physical supply and use of solid waste, as well as wastewater residuals, and physical supply of flows to the ocean. And then for the rest of the frameworks, we haven't started them, but we plan to do them in the following years. Next slide, please. So the main issues we faced during the pilot study are the data gaps, definitely. It is either the data is available, but not for the period of time that we expect, or it is not available at all. But anyway, it is still better to work with the wrong data, as you said, rather than work with no data at all. And the next issue we face is that about the monetary valuation. For the monetary valuation of ocean asset accounts, we admit that the method that we use to estimate the monetary value of ecosystem services provided by Gilimatra MPA is not yet ideal, but we learned from that, so we will improve it this year in the compilation of ocean asset accounts for 3 MPAs in the eastern part of Indonesia. And then we also aim to scale up the finding to the national level, of course, and that's why we also will conduct further in-depth studies to collect data for ocean flow accounts, with the hope that by the end of 2022, we will be ready to launch the Indonesia ocean flow accounts. Next slide, please. So ocean accounts provide several important pieces of information in support of policy and decision-making related to marine environment and marine resources management. And these are the policy uses that I have identified with regard to our work on ocean accounts. The first one is the policy use that has been proposed by the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. So ocean asset accounts can provide feedback for the improvement of MPA zoning. So in Gilimatra Marine Protected Area, they apply zoning in which area with high resource value will be classified as core zone, in which attentions will from relevant government will be given more to them as they have more resources to be taken care of. Basically, it is used to monitor the progress in achieving a sustainable use of ecosystem assets and preventing further loss of biodiversity. The next policy use that I want to highlight is the damage cost assessment. So the monetary asset accounts can be used as a basis for assessing compensation for damage caused by human activities such as ship accidents. So with that, I'll wrap up my presentation. Over to you, Kristen.
Thank you very much, Ria. And there is my slide. Thank you very much. My name is Christine Grimsrud, so I would also like to wish everyone good morning, a good day, and good afternoon. It must be horrible to be stuck with a coffee cup in the middle of the night, but I will present a research project that I think has some very useful results or methods that maybe we could collaborate with Indonesia. This research project is called MAREA. It runs from 2021 to 2025. It has funded by the Norwegian Research Council, funding of 1.3 million euros. The project is led by the Norwegian Institute of Water Research in collaboration with the Norwegian Institute of Nature Research. Statistics Norway has one work packet related to policy use of ocean accounting, and I will present that work packet today. Next slide, please. So the issue with the Oslo Fjord is that Oslo is the capital of Norway, and here you see some maps of the Oslo Fjord. In map A, you can see locations where recreational fishing is important. So map B shows which counties that make decisions that affect the ecological status of the fjord. So there are several. And then map C shows the ecological status of the Oslofjord, and where it's yellow, it's not very good condition. And in the orange parts, which if you're able to see that, it's poor. And so the map D actually shows where you have a lot of recreational activities. And this map is a heat map based on Strava data. The point of these three maps is to show that the fjord is quite popular with recreationists, but it's not in a good ecological condition. And to do something about this, several political entities has to coordinate to improve the situation. And we think that accounting can help systematize several data sources from to help restore the Oslofjord. Next slide, please. So the whole project was started with the idea that we first, some research institutions, including the research department at Statistics Norway, worked on finding all the different sources we could that could say something about the value the Oslofjord has to the local population. We used all sorts of monetary values, indicators, and we tried to put all this together, and we found that the Oslofjord is worth billions of kroner for the population living nearby. The values arise from boating, fishing, swimming, hiking, wastewater absorption, and people living, preferring to live near it. I think we can go back one slide, maybe. Back, yeah, there. But then, and so after this report, which actually was commissioned by the Norwegian Environment Agency, the Norwegian Environment Agency made an integrated plan for the Oslofjord with a number of proposed policy measures. And our project Marea will try to test out whether keeping accounts of recreation use and the use of the Oslofjord in general can help contribute to a better evaluation of the development in ecosystem values over time and the effects of policy measures and land use changes. We hope that this project will can have policy relevance in terms of help justify financial support from municipalities that wish to secure and manage public natural areas close to the Oslofjord, to improve the decision support from municipalities regarding land use and water pollution by using ecosystem accounting, to better sum up all the small land use changes locally as well as overall for the Oslofjord, to help improve the knowledge of the consequences of the accumulated land use changes around the fjord, and to demonstrate the value that these natural recreation areas have to the local and the national economy, and how these values are distributed between private and public sectors. Next slide, please. The objectives of the project is basically we'll use the statistics that we have at Statistics Norway, where we have all this housing price value data, and we will use this to estimate the recreation amenity values accruing to private properties that are within 100 meters of the coast in the Oslofjord. And then we will try to aggregate up these values per recreation area by seeing at a distance and what value is transferred to the home from being close to this area. And we can use this as a budget for basing integrated plan for the Oslofjord recommended a state purchase fund that could be used for property purchases of public recreation destinations. And we will also use this tool to try to demonstrate how we could make a tax assessment tool, and also how this could help decide public purchase guidelines for the local municipalities. So next slide, please. So in short, I will have to be very short now. We will, in task 5.1 in this work package, which Statistics Norway leads, we will look at finding the correct indicators of that shows that we can put into our hedonic price model. I didn't get time too much to go into that. And then we will formulate a hedonic price property model for the Oslofjord and see how being close to the fjord or being close to a recreation area affects the value of the property. In the next slide, please. And then in the last, we will look at trying to find the site asset value for public beaches and recreation area. And then we will look at how this can be used for public purchase decisions. And finally, we will develop a guidance document on real estate value assessment. I think I'm going to say thank you here. So you can move on to the final slide.
So thank you very much to the three of you. What an amazing example of having different stakeholders work together on methodological innovation, data generation, policy uptake of the data generated, and all these at times of COVID and at times where technical assistance and collaboration were not the easiest things to do. So congratulations, I think we all learned a lot. Let me now turn to another part of the world and another story from Ivan, who's the Director General of the NSO in Paraguay, and also a distinguished PARIS21 board member, who will give us his story on recent progress in creating a healthy climate change data ecosystem in Paraguay. So Ivan, the floor is yours. You please have to stop the interpretation with you, and everybody else, as Ivan will speaking in Spanish, you please use the interpretation as you need it. Ivan, the floor is yours.
Muy buenos días, un placer saludarte, François, en nombre tuyo y el querido amigo Johannes, saludar a todo el equipo de París 21. Muy buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Es para nosotros desde el Paraguay un placer ser parte de esta interesante presentación de varios países y por supuesto en este tema de ecosistemas de datos para la acción climática hacia un enfoque de datos inclusivos y coordinados. Paraguay está en el corazón de Sudamérica, es un país mediterráneo regado por dos principales ríos, con una población de 7.400.000 habitantes y un territorio de 407.000 kilómetros cuadrados. El cambio climático ha afectado en gran medida también al Paraguay, si bien América Latina y el Caribe aporta el 5% del dióxido de carbono o de los gases del efecto invernadero, el Paraguay aporta solamente el 0,02% según datos del Banco Mundial. Nuestro país es un país que tiene la característica de que produce el 100% de la energía eléctrica a partir de origen renovable. Y el 70% de nuestros productos son, digamos, canalizados o son exportados a través de los ríos. Pero el efecto climático ha hecho que los ríos se reduzcan en su caudal y de que también la producción se reduzca. Empecemos la presentación. La siguiente. Si pueden avanzar, la siguiente. En este contexto nos hemos dado cuenta de que a partir del 45, con la creación de Naciones Unidas, surge una primera ola estadística, que son las estadísticas económicas. Luego una segunda ola estadística en los 70 con las estadísticas sociales, y a partir del año 2000 una tercera ola de estadísticas que son las estadísticas medioambientales. Y esta gran agenda o la ambiciosa agenda de los ODS que nos plantean 17 grandes objetivos en donde nos damos cuenta de que prácticamente el 50% de las metas tiene al menos un componente medioambiental. Nos hemos dado cuenta a partir de un diagnóstico de capacidades que las fuentes de información para la construcción de indicadores de los ODS está en registros administrativos. Entonces, en el contexto del clima o del medio ambiente, fuimos a la cooperación con la Unión Europea para la elaboración de un atlas de estadísticas ambientales y de cambio climático que les voy a comentar en qué etapa está. Adelante, por favor. El Atlas es un trabajo a realizar en forma conjunta con las instituciones que son las rectoras. El Ministerio del Ambiente y Desarrollo Social es la que tiene la rectoría en materia ambiental y conjuntamente con la Comisión ODS del Paraguay. Lo que hemos hecho es plantear un marco conceptual mediante la revisión sistemática de experiencias nacionales e internacionales. A nivel nacional tenemos un Atlas de Género, que es una plataforma web en donde podemos ver las brechas entre hombres y mujeres, y también otras experiencias que existen en el país, como un Atlas de riesgos de desastres, y ver también, explorar lo que otros países están haciendo en el tema de Atlas ambiental y temas vinculados a estadísticas climáticas, principalmente abarcadas por los ODS. Siguiente. Todo esto con el objetivo, en primer lugar, de tener un monitoreo oportuno y tener la información para hacer frente a compromisos internacionales como la agenda de los ODS, compromisos nacionales como son el Plan Nacional de Desarrollo del Paraguay, que tiene una visión al 2030, también planes sectoriales como el de protección social, lucha contra la pobreza, etcétera, y planes locales territorializados en departamentos y distritos de la República. La siguiente. El proceso de desarrollo del Atlas tiene su inicio con una nueva ley. El Paraguay logró, luego de 78 años, ser instituto o tener un Instituto Nacional de Estadística. Antes era una dirección. Y en ese proceso, PARIS21 ha sido un gran protagonista porque nos ha ayudado a tener la primera estrategia nacional de desarrollo estadístico también, para potenciar el desarrollo de subsistemas sectoriales y temáticos. Y también, paralelamente, un diagnóstico de las capacidades de las instituciones para la construcción de los ODS. Y estos, por supuesto, tienen componentes también ambientales. La siguiente. El proceso de desarrollo del Atlas, los insumos iniciales tienen que ver un poco con algún tipo de registración que hacemos en nuestros anuarios. Tenemos anuarios oficiales del Paraguay con un antecedente desde 1886. En algunos, estos incluyen datos sobre territorio, hidrología y climatología e inclusive. También venimos trabajando en un sistema de información del agua, puesto que el agua es un recurso más que estratégico en el caso del Paraguay. Desde el año 2019 venimos con la Alianza Global de Datos para el Desarrollo Sostenible, también trabajando en un sistema de información de aguas basada en datos. Esto también pretendemos que sea parte del futuro Atlas medioambiental y de cambio climático. La siguiente. Invitamos a las instituciones que sean parte del CISEN, como el Ministerio de Desarrollo Social y del Ambiente, el Instituto Forestal, la Secretaría de Emergencia Nacional, el Ministerio de Agricultura, Yacenetá, que es una de las principales hidroeléctricas del país, y Itaipú también, que tiene récords mundiales en producción de energía eléctrica renovable, también el Viceministerio de Energía, la Dirección de Aeronáutica, el Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología, los rectores del manejo de aguas, tanto rurales como urbanas. Todos estos fueron invitados para la construcción de este Atlas medioambiental y de cambio climático, que actualmente está en su etapa de definición conceptual. La siguiente. También nos encontramos en la reglamentación de la nueva ley, y ahí incluimos un componente medioambiental bastante ambicioso. En primer lugar, hablemos de los censos y su periodicidad, y los censos de población y viviendas. Estamos en la ronda 2020, en donde el Paraguay también pretende hacer este año el 2022 su Censo Nacional de Población y Vivienda, midiendo condiciones de vida en general. Posteriormente, también el Ministerio de Agricultura está realizando un censo de actividades agropecuarias que buscan medir el comportamiento de las unidades primarias de la economía. Posteriormente, tendremos un censo económico que mide el comportamiento de las unidades económicas del sector secundario y terciario, todo lo que es industria, comercio, servicios, etcétera. Y aquí hacemos una gran apuesta de un camino que no está muy explorado, pero creo que el mundo se tiene que empezar a plantear hacer un censo en recursos naturales. Esto lo incluimos en la reglamentación de la nueva ley para que conjuntamente con el sistema de países en materia de recursos estadísticos podamos explorar la posibilidad y diseñar una metodología para que en el futuro tengamos también un censo de recursos naturales o que los países tengan un censo de recursos naturales. Siguiente. Finalmente, presentamos los desafíos para el desarrollo de este atlas medioambiental y las áreas estratégicas donde necesitamos más apoyo. En primer lugar, el fortalecimiento de áreas estratégicas con el fin de disponibilizar de manera oportuna y con calidad la información. También la necesidad de fortalecer el proceso de desarrollo metodológico en temas ambientales. En nuestra región es una de las que menos desarrollo tiene en estadísticas medioambientales. Es justamente por eso que nos ponemos como desafío tener un atlas medioambiental que nos ayude a explorar nuevas metodologías. Y aquí también acudir a fuentes no tradicionales como imágenes satelitales, el uso de radares, el Big Data, que nos ayuden a la construcción de los indicadores y por supuesto a la información de latas. También potenciar y fortalecer registros administrativos. Hoy el Paraguay está haciendo su primer inventario de registros administrativos oficiales, planteando un diagnóstico y también un plan de mejoras. También el desafío que tenemos los países de lograr la periodicidad en los operativos estadísticos. Y finalmente, incorporar la aplicación de nuevas metodologías como el uso de imágenes satelitales y todo lo que hablábamos en tecnología. Así que desde el Paraguay un saludo cordial a todos los participantes. Para nosotros es un placer poder compartir nuestra experiencia y por supuesto aprender también conjuntamente de la experiencia de los otros países. El cambio climático ya está presente y tiene que ser encarado de manera global para encontrar las soluciones y mitigar los efectos y alcanzar esa meta de no superar el 1,5 grados de calentamiento global. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very, very much, Ivan, for a wonderful presentation, echoing very clearly the speech from Stefan. You showed us how innovation works in your data ecosystem, how the NSO can be a leader on that front, putting together different survey census instruments, leveraging different data sources and putting the framework, the law around it. I liked your explanations on the assessment tools. This resonated a lot with some of the discussions from yesterday as well. So thanks to the three presenters and well, quite a number from the Norway Indonesian team. If you don't mind, I'd like to give you one question each. We got some questions from the participants. We have 4 minutes, so if you could be super short in your answers, that would be super useful. So maybe if I go to Stefan, we had a question on what is, according to you, the core capability for an NSO to be a meaningful data steward. So if you had to pick one capability or infrastructure, what would that be?
And now you're making it hard by putting asking one. I think you need a couple. You need to have the empowerment. I mean, and the legal framework also to assume that role, so that you become a respected partner and you can actually invite other people to the table and have also, for instance, the access to the data. I think that is the most important thing, that somebody can actually maintain the overview of what kind of data is actually available in the country. Because I find very often there is a lot of information in countries, but it's very dispersed and there is just no mechanism in place to pull it effectively together. So I think having that mandate, that capability, and then I think the second point is also you need to have a subject matter knowledge. I mean, that may be an area for statistical officers that is challenging, because they traditionally have subject matter knowledge in the more classical areas like census taking and national accounts or something like that. But as our information system increases in many directions, I think national statistical officers also have to beef up a little bit in terms of thematical coverage. They don't have to be the super experts on every area, but they have to have people who definitely understand the basics and are capable of pulling the national information resources effectively together.
Thank you very much, Stefan. One question to Paraguay. I think, Ivan, you impressed a number of our participants who come with the question of resources. Yesterday, we heard from Antigua, who has also quite a sophisticated system, who put some human resources. What would be your advice, Ivan, to the NSOs who still fail to mobilize resources to make it happen? Where do you start? What is your recipe?
Nosotros consideramos que la agenda de los ODS es un motor para el desarrollo de los ecosistemas de datos. Entonces, hay mucha cooperación en el mundo para desarrollar los ecosistemas de datos. La cooperación entre países es fundamental. De hecho, nosotros tenemos también limitaciones de recursos, pero lo que hicimos es, como punto de partida, tener un diagnóstico de los ODS y a partir de ahí definir nuestras necesidades. Y por sobre todo ponernos desafíos grandes en aquellos espacios de información que no existen y acudir a la experiencia, digamos, internacional, que hay mucha cooperación dispuesta y mucha cooperación a veces gratuita, de cooperantes y por supuesto de países. Nos ponemos a disposición para cooperar en todo. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Ivan, and well noted on the offer for some advice and training with others. One quick question to Norway and Indonesia. How did you make it happen in those terrible times of COVID-19, where we could not travel, everyone was looking somewhere else than climate change? What is your recipe of success? I don't know who wants to take this question, but maybe just a few words would be nice to hear from the three of you.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting question. Actually, we are a little delayed given the plans we had, but the dialogue started back in 2020. We haven't still met each other physically, but we have managed to have at least 10 numbers of digital technical meetings with our colleagues in Indonesia. So, but the Ocean for Development program is much broader than a statistic and research cooperation between our institution and the Indonesian Statistics Institute. So we're kind of still trying to get the Environment Agency and the Marine Research Institute also, I mean, getting the broader institutional cooperation on place. But I'm not sure if I have a very clear answer, but we just kind of, I mean, Indonesia was very concrete in their demands of what they wanted to cooperate in, and they had already developed parts of their ocean accounting in accordance with the system of environmental economic accounting. So maybe the fact that they were quite concrete in their demands has and that we have subject matter experts in statistics Norway being very engaged in this topic, like Kristine Grimsrud, that has of course helped a lot. Maybe that's a theory I have, but it's definitely hard to just work together digitally. So we look forward to meet and work with each other shoulder to shoulder as well. I'll stop. Maybe you have some addings, Christina or Ria, on this topic.
Yes, maybe we can.
It would be best if Ria gave some input if there's time, since she's on the
please,
other.
Absolutely, 1 minute.
Okay, well, I didn't say that there wasn't any problem in the compilation of the ocean accounts. So for the ocean asset accounts, actually we need to reduce the number of the sites that we want to calculate for the account. So it was supposed to be 3 MPAs, but we ended up with 1 MPA only in Gilimatra. So that's some of the justification due to COVID measurement. But yeah, it still gave us the best result that we could do.
Excellent. Well, let me thank you again for very informative and lots of lessons learned for our community. So thanks to all of you for detailed presentation, the keynote speech from Stefan, and I think we bring some of your solutions and optimism in the next session, which will be a panel and which Kathy will moderate. So thanks again, and Kathy, over to you.
Great, thank you, Francois, and welcome everyone to our next session, which is a panel discussion focusing on identifying some of the levers of change in terms of what it will take to realize the value of climate change data ecosystems at country level. Today, we have 5 speakers on the panel who will build on the good examples that we have just heard and discuss various perspectives of what can drive countries to change the traditional ways of doing things, to break the silos and to develop an ecosystem approach, and to take advantage really of the value of these systems to meet the demands for climate change data. So I'll just briefly introduce the panel participants. Joining me, I have Ms. Levon Williams, who is the Chief Statistician in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I have Fernanda Alcoubey, who is a researcher at the International Institute for Environment and Development, who has been working on climate change policy design and implementation for over 13 years. We have Ian Townsend, who is the Deputy Director for Environment at the UK Office of National Statistics. We have Gabriel Piros Romero, who is a Deputy Director in the Statistics Department at the IMF. And we have Johannes Friedrich, who is the Director of Climate Data at the World Resources Institute. So welcome, everybody. I will begin by asking you each a question related to your work, and then we can reflect together on a final question. And there will hopefully be some time left over for additional questions from the Q&A window. So please, participants, if you have any questions to the panelists during the discussion, please put them in the Q&A. Perhaps I can begin with Ms. Williams. You are in the process of assessing your national strategy for statistics in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Could you explain briefly some of the important aspects of how you've been working with the different actors in the system? What do you think are the incentives for getting these actors to work together? So please, Levon, if you want to give an answer, maybe for around 4 minutes, that would be great.
Okay, so good morning again to everyone from my part of the world. And from beautiful St. Vincent, and thank you. So yes, as you rightly said, we are in the process of developing the national strategy for the development of statistics, and thanks to Paris 21, that, you know, that's assisted us in this respect greatly. We're currently doing an assessment of the national statistical system, which we realize it is very fundamental. It is important before we can talk of any strategy to do an assessment. The assessment will seek to clarify and evaluate the statistical data that are produced now, where are data gaps, the statistical capacity needs of the members of the national statistical system, because we think that it is critical towards strengthening the production of statistics in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So as a statistical office that is mandated and has the mandate for the national statistical system, we had to take the lead. And so as you talk about the different actors, both on the producers and the users, so even before the assessment, we considered undertaking the assessment. There are some synergies that existed across the NSS. The statistical is very involved in terms of, we would have established some MOUs with the MDAs or ministries, department agencies for data sharing that allows us to access data across the MDAs. We are also the central repository for the SDG data, where all the data from the different ministries, the MDAs, they are submitted to the statistical office, and we have a monitoring system where we look at the data that is produced, and we would have that feedback mechanism where we go back to the producers and let them know, you know, where the data is short, where we need to strengthen the data. We also, there's some initiative that on the ground, we have been working with the Sustainable Development Unit, as here I say that they're responsible for climate change data. And we've been working with them to become the central repository for the climate. So it's a system that we're helping them to put in place so that when they collect the system, it will be hosted at the statistical office. Also, other initiatives that we would have undertaken in terms of working along with our producers for our last volcanic eruption. We would have worked with the National Emergency Management Organization, which is NEMO, to help them to set up a data processing and collection center that streamlined the collection of all the data that were collected during the volcanic eruption. And we were instrumental after that process in terms of helping them cleaning the data and have it disseminated using the Kobo tool. So we have been working with the different actors. So that's on the producer side. On the user side, we have a mechanism where we try to get the feedback from our users. Recently, we have redeveloped our website, which is our main dissemination tool, where we offer a variety of a diversity of statistical products. We have made it more user-friendly so our users can navigate our website. And what we endeavor to do and what we have been doing, as the requests are made and the requests are filed on our website, we keep a request, we keep an inventory of all those requests, because what we need to do and what we have started doing is to streamline and focus on the statistical data that were frequently requested from our users. And I think that, you know, what we're doing is really giving them that opportunity, you know, to feel a part of the system and to work with our different actors in the system. There are a lot of incentives to this whole process, and we're hoping that our users can, you know, leverage the different incentives. First of all, we want to, you know, have that monitoring and evaluation system where both our users and our that, you know, when the data is sent to us, we can, you know, ensure that the data is quality, that we have quality data there, so that our users can access the data. So as I was saying, yes, we're doing the development of the NSDS. And we're hoping coming out of this strategy that we can identify, as I said, the data gaps, and the strategy document is gonna help us to develop an action plan, give us that mission, that vision that will set the direction in which the national statistical system should go and the path that it should take, so that our you know, from both ends, we can benefit from such a system. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think that was some very good points and ties quite nicely in with what Stefan said at the end of the last session. That is very much about empowerment, you know, being able to, who has the power to, the mandate to do the work, and also getting the right experts on board to make sure that it's the work is relevant and it's able to you're able to move forward and see the benefits of this data. Perhaps I could move on to Fernanda. You have been researching climate change in developing countries for many years. We heard now what has been done to increase coordination among the actors in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Does this resonate with your experience in the area of climate change? And what are the main developments you've seen in your research?
Thanks, good morning or good evening. Thank you, Kath, and thank you all the team of PARIS21 for giving me this opportunity to be here today. And I really agree with Mrs. Williams. Indeed, I think that coordination among actors is one of the biggest challenges in data gathering and reporting on climate change. Sometimes, usually the institutions or teams in charge of developing the policies and the reports to, for example, for the UNFCCC Convention, the Climate Change Convention, and the one developing the climate data, they work in isolation. And this brings to my mind a survey that was conducted by the Secretariat of the Climate Change Convention to developing countries. And in that survey, the respondent expressed that just the National Statistical Agency was fully involved in climate data monitoring and reporting, but just in 7%. So 7% of the countries where those two the national agencies were deeply involved in the reporting. So that shows that countries and agencies are still working like in isolation. And I think that also this can be linked to the fact that in terms of climate data, countries have started to gather and to develop the data mainly to report to international demand. So the demand was from the international arena on climate reporting, for example, national communications, so the greenhouse gas inventories and submit their national determined contributions now. So that was the way that mainly the focal points are maybe in ministries of environment and not in the statistical agencies. So that's the way maybe they're not too connected. But now we have seen in recent years that countries have started to change that and to dialogue more from the international to the national. So just try to meet international demand and national needs. For example, in case study recently published, Mauritania was showing how they integrated in their climate reporting structures other national planning processes. For example, their vision, they are developing vision. So and other countries can find synergies with the Sustainable Development Goals, or this can help to integrate data producers with the data users and also build more solid systems. We also see that along the years, countries have also learned to better understand their data gaps and needs for reporting. In a study that we conducted last year, analyzing all the transparency reports submitted by the least developed countries, which is the main focus of our work in my team in IID. And those countries consistently along the years, they were identifying that the lack of data was the main constraint in climate reporting. And almost all 90% of their national communications, they state that. But also what we realized that as more as they were gaining more experience in reporting, that this lack of data was also accompanied by other needs, like more disaggregated challenges, like poor data quality, or lack of data management systems and institutional issues. So the data was not isolated, then was understanding that they need to have a system just to report, and they need they need some more support on those. And then also, other thing that we've seen that the countries have been improving, especially developing countries have been improving in reporting to all these multiple requirements and reports, but also the thing is that the international climate reporting has also been increasing the demand. So it's like they are almost running behind, because when they started to report, it was just one national communications every 4 years. Now they have the national communications plus another biannual report, and now with the Paris Agreement, the Enhanced Transparency Framework will have a more stringent report. So it's more information, more data, more. So yes, so this is particularly challenging for least developed countries and other vulnerable countries, because they have limited human and financial resources to respond to all those multiple demands. So yes, I think I can keep it there for sake of time.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Now, I think as you've made very good points there in terms of the institutional issues which you've seen, but also bringing back to the issue of the global versus national and how we can integrate these different needs for the data so that countries are able to meet both needs on both levels, I think is interesting. Maybe I can move on to Ian. Fernanda noted some of these important developments and the changes in priorities and so on. The ONS has been making some progress as well in putting together a portal for climate change statistics. Perhaps could you share with us some of your experiences of this process and some of the decisions you had to make in order to make progress with this portal? Over to you, Ian.
Hi, thanks, Kathy. Thanks very much, and thanks for the opportunity to share our learnings from the UK here today, and good day to all of you wherever you are in the world. Yes, so we were able to successfully launch the prototype National Climate Change Statistics portal in time for the COP26 conference, and to also showcase it in Glasgow at the conference itself. So there's 6 things that I'd like to kind of highlight from that experience. One, and I noticed this is something that colleagues have raised on the call, we had quite organic origins for the idea. So the idea of a one-stop shop for climate statistics emerged from discussions among UK analysts across government. It's a really cross-cutting issue anyway, and also the UK has quite a decentralized statistics system with many different bodies producing outputs, publications, data sets. So there's a real feeling that bringing these together on especially for such a cross-cutting issue would be really valuable. So there's a real coming together of agreement in general, in principle, from the outset. And I think the role of the ONS as the National Statistics Institute as a convener of both people and data was very helpful for helping this to happen. The second one is around enabling governance. So we created early on a project steering group and a wider advisory group, which brought together central government departments, other related bodies to government, including the UK Met Office and our Climate Change Committee, and also the devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. This helped to really engage the really broad range of stakeholders that were needed, and also formed a really helpful key audience for our user testing for the portal. The third is around an enabling framework. So linking again to some of the conversations that have been mentioned here today, we agreed quite early on to bring together into a kind of cross-government agreed statistical framework 5 international indicator sets, including the SDGs, and 1 domestic framework as well. So we have currently around 200 indicators across 6 pillars. So we've divided these up across climate and weather as 1, drivers and emissions and impact, mitigation and adaptation. So this long list was very useful when we were thinking about prioritizing what to add to the portal, which takes me on to my next point, which is prioritization of those indicators. So again, with limited resources, we couldn't add all 200 in time for COP26, and we needed really a proof of concept in the prototype. So we prioritized across a few things, including having coverage across all 6 pillars, so at least 1 indicator for each of the 6 pillars. Also, where well-structured data was already available, and also having the ability to tell a few small number of coherent stories with the indicators that we were able to add. So that was a helpful process too. I think the next thing is really around the different audiences. So we have, so the target audience for our portal was the government analysts, which came together initially to bring this idea forward. But we have within the portal 3 layers. We have one, the data explorer, which is aimed at the expert who wants to find, download, and use data sets from this for their own work. The second is a dashboard layer, which is aimed at a slightly broader audience and with a visual approach, which is informed by the work in the UK on the COVID dashboard in this country. And earlier in the project, we'd envisaged a third layer, which was for a much wider public audience, and that would come in a second iteration. But because we were able to make such rapid progress on the prototype, we actually ended up having 3 articles in this layer aimed at that wider public to help them through complex subjects. And one of these is on the 3 different measures of greenhouse gas emissions in the UK, which explains them and shows the latest data for each. And I think the last thing I'd share would be around having a focused timeline. So we agreed collectively quite early on that the COP26 conference last November in the UK was a really good target to aim for. Obviously being held in Glasgow in the UK, and being able to demonstrate the portal at the conference alongside the Met Office, which has developed a really useful global climate dashboard, and that links to points that colleagues have made here today as well. This all meant that we could benefit from strong media and public interest. And it felt to me like delivering to that COP26 milestone helped to garner interest and engagement. We had around 4,000 unique users and over 500 survey feedback responses just in the first couple of weeks. And helpfully, this feedback was also very positive. So we had 80+% ease of use scores on our user survey for those that responded to us. And interestingly, even though we designed the portal for our government audience, they were only 1/5 of those that undertook the survey. So 80% of our users were non-central government users. Anyway, that's all I was going to share for now, but very happy to pick up in questions later. Thanks.
Great, thank you. That sounds really interesting. And I think if you have, it's only a prototype, right? So it's not for public use, yeah. So, but I think if you share any other experiences in the chat or so on, that would be great.
Just to say, it is available publicly. Okay, it's a prototype for the public,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Specifically designed as a dissemination tool for the general public,
yeah.
But it's the first iteration, really. Yeah.
Okay, but please share a link maybe in the chat, and I'm sure people will be interested to go and delve a bit deeper, because I think your issues of prioritization and among all these indicators, and also the tying it to policy development, I think is really interesting. And as you said, that it also provided a bit of the value and the benefits of these kind of systems. Gabriel, I wonder if you, the IMF also has a dashboard to present climate change indicators, and you've had it for many years. Do you recognize the kind of issues that Ian was mentioning in terms of prioritization and so on? And if maybe you could just reflect on what you see the value is of these kind of dashboards, how they can help to ensure that data are available for policy use in country. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Indeed, what Ian has explained resonates quite well in our own experience at the IMF developing our dashboard. And thank you to you, Kathy, and the organizers for giving the opportunity to the IMF to say a couple of words about our dashboard. Just one element, Kathy and colleagues, I mean, actually our dashboard is actually quite still in the infancy. We launched the dashboard actually tomorrow 1 year ago on the 7th of April 21 at the spring meetings of the World Bank IMF. So that's, and actually this is one point I want to start by explaining to you what the dashboard is and what the dashboard aspires. The dashboard is basically a framework of statistics and data from with a focus on the economic and financial dimensions of climate change. Actually, the IMF as international organization has been a relatively late comer in incorporating climate change into the core mandate of the mandate of the IMF in terms of economic and financial surveillance, multilateral and country surveillance. So what we aspire from here, the first thing we have to do when we launch the project, and the project was only launched in January 2020. Actually, the pandemic with all the bad things allows us to mobilize resources to other new fields. And the high priority during the pandemic in the work of the IMF and especially the Statistics Department at the IMF has been to develop the dashboard. We developed it not from the scratch. We were very keen during the first years, basically, in reaching out to all those stakeholders, other international organizations. There are many, but I cannot escape without mentioning the United Nations, the OECD, many others, also in the private sectors and countries working on climate. So we really want to take a stock, and from there we design a framework basically which actually gives the following story. Try to take the following story through 23 indicators, major indicators right now. But this is still tomorrow will be its first years of life. It still is work in progress that we will have to develop over the next years. Basically, the first element is indeed to focus not and to add value from an economic and financial perspective. You want a narrow focus of climate change. In this respect, we basically try to produce information partly on the existing methodology, partly on the data sources already provided by the international organization, but with their own value added of the IMF Statistics Department around production. Basically, we try to see what is the type of economic activities and what the type of energy that are emitting more greenhouse emissions or less greenhouse emissions. So we have a group of indicators about production. But we only immediately go saying, well, the story cannot stop in production. In economic activity, it needs to be the demand side, because of course, if one country is a big producer of emitting of certain activities that emit a lot of greenhouse, then what happens is that some other countries, maybe in Europe, for example, or in other countries, are importing that production in that country. So from a global institution, which is very much looking at international trade, the IMF put a lot of emphasis on the demand of, because indeed it's not only a problem, climate change of the countries producing certain type of products, also those who are consuming those products. It's a global problem, and we need to indicate this through the second group, demand side consumption end. The third element that we do is that the cross-border, we go further in terms of the cross-border dimension of climate change, and we look at issues like foreign direct investment, how, for example, multinationals are actually moving part of their activity from their home countries to host countries where maybe the regulation on climate is less stringent than at the home country. So, and we look into from the lenses of foreign direct investment. So we reinforce this idea of it's a global problem. Some of the production which is happening in some, for example, emerging economies that are polluting from the production side a lot, is actually because some stakeholders, in particular in multinationals, are moving part of their production to those countries because of differences in national regulations on climate. Then we bring the issue of financial system, and the financial system, we make sure that how the financial system is moving resources to greener or less green type of economic activities. And we look into the carbon footprint bank loans. And definitely last point here I would like to make is that we definitely look into the fiscal policies. It's critical for the policy perspective to look into how subsidies and taxes are going to facilitate the transition to a greener economy. What we want to do with the framework is to offer to the countries a possibility of harnessing their data along those lines from an economic and financial perspective. And we hope that going forward, our capacity development and technical assistance will be based largely on our framework as a benchmark. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I think it's super interesting as well to see the links between climate change and other areas. We saw that also with the presentation from Indonesia and Norway, how everything is so interlinked, and it's interesting to get together these different aspects, these different dimensions. So thank you for that. So last but not least, Johannes, we heard about the difficulties of coordinating even these traditional statistical systems. Climate change is one where these new data sources, combining different types of data and so on, could help to support and develop official statistics and reporting. You have been working for many years on integrating and using alternative data sources to inform the data landscape. Do you have any good examples of where data have been combined from different sources to provide indicators for reporting and policy use?
Yes, of course, thank you. And I put some examples in the chat because I won't have time to go into details on each of those. So I'm going to give the one sentence answer first, which is make sure you know why you want specific data and for whom. So the key approach that we usually taking, that we've seen whenever we work with other stakeholders as well, is start with a problem and a specific user that can actually help you solve that problem, and keep that in mind throughout the whole process. So I'm going to come back to this in some of the examples. You'll see this, but it's also helpful to frame a little bit of the problem, because when we talk about climate data, the scope is actually quite huge. It goes from anything from mitigation, which is kind of the obvious emissions, economic activity, policies, to adaptation when it comes to vulnerability of our energy systems, cities, food system, climate hazards, to finance, local gender information or information on just transition. And the challenges you might have there might be quite different, because there's different levels of data that you need. Something might be simple statistical Excel to terabytes of geographic data from satellites, for example. So again, like, it needs to be a little bit specific on the problem that you're trying to solve, specific with the eye towards an external, like the solution that you actually want to get to. Challenges that we've seen with data are typically, now we'll come back to this, does the data exist? Is it not accessible? For example, does it exist, but is it not open or not easily accessible? And is it actually used? Is it fit for purpose? And this is going back again, does it have a concrete use case? And have the users that you actually want to use the data, for example, have the capacity to use the data, and how you're presenting this. So to give some quick examples of making this very concrete on how we apply kind of like these kind of questions and challenges that we've seen. One good example is Climate Watch. So for Climate Watch, for example, what we've seen before Paris and with the Paris Agreement, countries were asked to create plans to reduce emission and adapt to climate change, for example, by submitting these kind of climate plans, which are called, many of you might know, NDCs. But creating these plans actually requires a lot of knowledge that is often lacking, as well as not only submitting these plans, but implementing these plans requires a whole of government approach. So this is where we came in and said there is actually a lack of knowledge for both people who are trying to create these plans, as well as people for understanding how to implement them. And we took a lot of the disjointed data from governments and the UN, and for example, compiled the most granular data that covers all countries' emissions by sectors, by gas. It's like a couple 100,000 data points. We also take these kind of climate plans that countries submit, for example, the NDCs, the long-term strategies, net zero targets. There's actually a lot of these different things, and translate them to hundreds of indicators of action. So you really understand what a country is saying, how they might transform their sectors. And this actually led to, even though this is mostly government data, it's actually there, kind of, but we're making it accessible, translating it. Now we have thousands of users and governments actually are using it. The data is cited in 24 NDCs in total. It's one of the most cited sources in NDCs, which shows you a little bit that it's kind of like, if you start with a problem, but also understand, is it sometimes, does the data really not exist, or is it maybe there, but it's actually not quite usable? So this is one of the good examples. Another example, I won't go too much into detail, but if you're interested, System Change Lab. It's really trying to change our thinking towards system transitions and monitor around 200 total shifts towards how much progress you make to a certain benchmark. So it's a very broad approach. And again, there's a key question here, which is, how do you spend your money best if you're actually trying to transition to a low carbon world, avoid biodiversity loss? And this is really targeted at public and private funders, which is an issue we often heard here. So this is currently in development, so if you're interested, definitely reach out to us if you want to see a preview or become testers. So there's kind of like 3 messages to summarize this for me. One is check if data is missing, if it's actually not accessible. Make sure it's fit for purpose, and this is start with the purpose, and then focus your effort, which is something that Ian also said. He's like, climate change is such a huge topic. You won't be able to solve everything at once, but you can focus your effort if you actually know which problems you have that you might most urgently try to solve. That's my quick summary.
Great, thank you. No, I think that was really clear. I mean, especially the idea of accessibility and making, making sure that the data that you have is suiting the use. I mean, some data is better than no data, but only if it's relevant and able to be used, of course. So I think that gives a really good point. And also the value for money perspective. We've been talking about financing and funding, and I think that's it's important to show the benefit and to make sure that you're getting the value for what you're producing and so on. So thank you very much for that. And thanks for the other panelists for providing these interesting examples of the steps being taken to manage climate change data in this coherent way. So I'd like maybe to ask the panel participants to look forward now and maybe share some thoughts on what can be done at country level to realize the benefits of these systems that we've been looking at and of the examples that Johannes had as well. Particularly thinking in terms of low resource and low capacity contexts. So perhaps I can start again from Laverne. You have 2 minutes maybe to respond. So please, over to you.
Okay, so good morning again from St. Vincent. So the question is, what needs to be done at the country level to see how we can maximize the benefits of the systems that are in place? And one of the things that we have been advocating is to see that, we have the right people in the right place. We realize that resources are very scarce and we're low on resources. And I think having the right people in the right place, that means we need to build a capacity. So that is something that we have been advocating, because we realize that in the persons who are dealing with the climate change data and data generally, you find that when they leave, that institutional knowledge is lost. So we have been advocating that we have the right people. So we build a capacity so that we will have the persons there, so that you don't have that turnover, that regular turnover of persons leaving, and then, everything is lost. And also, I mentioned before a monitoring system, what we need, because it takes an assessment of what is produced, what needs to be improved, what are we doing well, what are we not doing right, and how we can improve that, so that we can make sure that we are maximizing and making best use of the resources that we have available, because we know that the resources are scarce. So that is what I am advocating, and that is how I see that from our end, or generally how we can, really from a country level, maximize the benefit, make sure that we get value for the money. Let's make sure that we maximize the benefits and we get the results that we are looking for at the end of the process. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I think that's especially relevant, as you point out, in these low resource context, the ability to prioritize. I mean, that's something that Ian pointed out as well, but to really be able to see exactly what is needed and how is best to get hold of that and to organize the system. Fernanda, do you have any thoughts to share?
Can I back to Kathy?
Yes, yes, of course.
Sorry, before you go to Fernando,
yes.
I had indicated before that I'll have to exit the meeting. So I will just ask the party persons if they have questions, you can present them to Paris and you can forward the questions to me. I have a World Bank negotiation meeting, so I have to attend a meeting. It is in session already. So I had indicated before that I will have to exit after this, this session. So if you can please excuse me, and I'll be happy to answer what questions once you forward those questions to me. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your interesting input. Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Fernanda.
Yes, I was just thinking that yeah, I think that there are 4 things that countries can be start implementing. First, to ensure that the international reporting is also responds to their national agendas. So just try to use the climate reporting to guide and inform national and subnational level policies, not just to see that it's a requirement that the country needs to comply, but just use that and make the best out of for the country at the national and subnational level. Also to promote dialogues between the data users and producers within the country. And this can be promoted as we were saying, the countries need sometimes present their strategies like these NDCs or the long-term strategies. It would be important just to start thinking from that point of view, how then they are going to report on the implementation of those strategies, what the information is going to be needed, indicators. So if they are started to think from that side, so then they will easily go to their people that develop the climate data, because they will need some support and understanding of what would be needed in the future to report the implementation of the progress on those strategies. And this can, but also this dialogue needs to be formalized, cannot be just ad hoc. And for that, countries need to work in developing and strengthening the integral climate change data ecosystem. There are systems, solid systems. For example, up to now, most LDCs, their reports have been prepared mainly by consultants that they are like through a fly-in, fly-out model. Then that needs to change. Definitely, countries need to have their own systems that respond to their national circumstances and priorities, and are built on existing resources and structures. So this is need to go. Should be the next step for everybody. But of course, building a climate change data ecosystem or a monitoring system is not simple or cheap task, especially for those countries that are low-income countries with limited resources and staff. So the other point is that those countries really need to receive support to implement long-term capacity building programs, and then to access also predictable funding. They need timely, sustained financial and technical support to improve data production, and also to improve their reporting over time, and not let them behind in the process.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think, I mean, tying back to use is super important. What Johannes was saying in his intervention, I think is, you know, to really be able to prioritize based on the use perspective. And yeah, we like the systems approach, so that's good. That's a good way. But as you say, it needs to be realistic. It needs to be applicable. It needs to be something that countries can actually implement with the resources that they have. You know, so it needs to be something that's flexible and so on. So that's a very good point. Perhaps I can move on to Ian. Do you have anything to add on looking forward?
Yeah, I do. I think ours is probably a bit more on our plans for the next phase of the portal, which obviously was a prototype. So I think just 4 things I think I'd like to share. So I think that, well, before that, just to say that I think ultimately getting the benefits from the systems like the portal really comes down to them being used, and that's both by policymakers and government and the public beyond that as well. So we're looking to remain live to users' needs and drawing on the the feedback we've had on the portal, we're looking to develop it next into a new phase. So one area is around the kind of look and feel. So looking at a more attractive design refresh of the site with easier navigation for people, access to featured content in the articles a bit more easily than currently, and improved accessibility, particularly on mobile devices, because that's an increasing audience for this kind of output. I think the second one is around localization. So within the UK, I think people like to see what things mean for their particular area. And our most popular publication in the run up to COP26 last year was to help users to explore local carbon dioxide emissions and woodland cover in their area. And I think the public can already explore those two indicators on the portal, but we're looking to see what more local level indicators we can bring in the short term, but also to develop in the longer term as well to serve that need and interest. Obviously looking to add more indicators and articles, both to add more of both to inform both those to different audiences that they're aimed at, and we're looking to add into our statistics framework new indicator sets such as those in the UK's net zero strategy and also the recently agreed UN global set. And we might also take a particular focus on adaptation, which may well be a key issue at COP27 this year. And the final area is around kind of faster indicators. So there's a real demand out there for more rapid updated indicators. Most of the things that we report tend to be reported on an annual basis. So we're looking currently to see what statistics we can usefully bring together on a more regular basis, drawing on statistical sources from across the government as well as within the National Statistics Institute as well, and our rapid surveys of businesses and individuals as well. Just on the sort of low-income, resource-constrained context, the ONS previously co-produced the open reporting platform, OpenSDG, which is available to our countries, regions, and cities to use, and is used by very many. I believe that we are making the tools that we're developing for the portal and the wider integrated data service program, which this is part of, to be available to others as well. So hopefully that might be of some support, but always happy to see what we can do to help others that are working in similar spaces, such as taking part in events just like this. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's much appreciated. No, I think the point about disaggregated data, getting data at local level, as you say, that's where the general public really see the value of these kind of systems. And we discussed earlier between the global level and the national level, but then also you have the subnational level, which I think is also playing a really important role. So that's useful. And yes, I mean, great. The tools that are already available, that already exist, is important that we see how we can use those even in different areas. The progress that has been made to coordinate SDG reporting, I think, is something we can learn a lot from and probably reuse. Gabriel, over to you. Do you have anything plans for the future after 1 year of your portal?
Well, no, thank you, Kathy. Basically, two ways of responding to this question. The first is to offer our dashboard, IMF Dashboard. You can go to our IMF Dashboard, and you can click. You are in any country. You can click the name of your country, and then you will see what I have said about the 23 indicators for your respective country. So we offer this to the countries to see how do we see the economic and financial dimension of climate change per country. So this is our offer. So maybe this is something that you can reflect about in the way we have seen from that perspective, narrow focus on climate. So you can have this, and you have this available for 191 countries. So the second more specific point I would like to advise the countries, indeed, is that first, there is a clear coordination at the country level, coordination among the institutions which has an interest on climate change. Because of course, this has become a high priority for everybody, for many institutions, and the worst in a resource constraint context is that different institutions duplicate the work. So we have to look for for division of labor at the country level and synergies across institutions which have an interest at the country level. For that. That for me, I've done strong advice. So there should be kind of somewhere a coordination at the country level on what is going to be done in order to think about a medium to long-term work plan for climate change data. The second point is that when it comes to data sources, I would encourage to have the new technologies, to think about the new technologies. From the statistical perspective, we cannot resort anymore on surveys. This is very obvious. We have satellite information. Satellite information, what we can call it in general big data, is particularly fitting well for some elements of climate change. And satellite information gives a wealth of information. And I think this is something that I would really like to suggest, and we are doing this in our climate change dashboard going forward in our development of the climate change dashboard. Thinking of another element, methodology. The methodology is there basically. There are good handbooks, there are good texts about methodology. Maybe they are sometimes not really focused on climate change, more in the, for example, but we have the great system of environmental economic accounts, which is already there. However, how to transition from the environment in general to climate change specifically, Johannes was saying before, we have to be very specific on what are we asking for, and then we have to go with an incremental approach with existing methodologies to have the methodology that we have actually, we want to shape specifically for our climate change data. Think of a medium term. Don't try to be to have it good at the very beginning. Be experimental. That's something this is what we have with the dashboard. We don't aspire to have official statistics yet for climate change, to be very clear, because if we that, then we'll have to wait for 10 years, and that will be too late for data to help the policy making on climate. So, and last but not least, obviously, we need to have an international effort, coordinated effort to help the countries. And obviously, PARIS21 is very well placed to coordinate that coordination, which is critical. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you. I'm very pleased that you brought up the issue of new technologies and the kind of experimental aspects, because I see we've received some comments in the Q&A as well about using different types of data. How do you integrate these? How can these work together with maybe traditional sources of data? So I think the issue of data sources is very important. Maybe Johannes, do you want to build on that at all about moving forward?
Yeah. Happy to, and I do think there's a lot of obvious things that have already been said, like the capacity building and the increase in finance, that are kind of like really central here. So I'm trying to add some like other approaches and a little bit towards what the other speakers were saying, particularly around the area of focus and how to make it efficient, because there's never going to be enough resources, quite even. It doesn't matter where you are. So one of the key aspects I do think is very helpful is to partner and learn. A lot of the issues that we have with climate data, and again, like these are specific to what climate data you're talking about and where and what technology and so on and what problems. Others have faced those. There's other governments that have done similar work. There's good private sector organizations that are really keen to help. There's great non-profits that have a lot of experience. There's a huge opportunity to partner and learn more. It took the World Resource Institute decades to learn to really, how do you identify an underlying problem that you're trying to solve? And in many cases, to see like, maybe it's not data alone that solves the problem. Maybe data is just one of the puzzle pieces that you need. And it's strange for me to say as a data person, but sometimes there's a little bit too much of a focus on data, because a lot of the underlying problems data can help, but data are just like one piece of the puzzle. And then also like other experience that we've learned and others learned with the time, and because like how to work with users from the beginning. And also after you get the data out there, how to work for the years to come to enable data users and build capacity. If the data is just out there, it's often like not quite enough. So I do think there's a huge opportunity actually out there, particularly just like building more learning communities around like issues that like all of us face. Most of the governments, most of the ministries, a lot of the private sector, a lot of non-profit have faced similar kind of issues in how to address specific climate problems with specific climate data kind of thing. So that's kind of the one thing I would encourage.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think this idea of as you were talking before about fitness for purpose and trying to use the data that is existing, whether it's experimental or different kind of data sources and so on, is super important. I don't know, Fernando, did you want to build on what Gabriel and Johannes were saying about using different types of data, citizen data? I saw you mentioned, you put in the Q&A. Do you have anything to add to that based on your experience?
Yes, I was just wanted to answer to the question from Suha Mohammed, and it is related to that countries are now in this when they are now starting to build their national system. They are also realizing that this needs the whole of a government approach, and also they are also including other stakeholders and in that building more capacity, and that's a good way to engage research institutes or universities and to build also their capacities. That's because the data and the information is so much and there's spread all over in different places that it's good to also involve universities and research institutes and non-governmental organizations in the process in the system. So just to have more people involved that can support the development of the reports or the policies. And one example is in this case study, Mauritania, they also have like this coordination mechanism, very simple, but which different relevant ministries and other level of governments also, at the provincial level, and also the agencies and other civil societies. So all together just to gather the information. Of course, that each country will need to develop that at their own way, but yes, I think that is a greater is more opportunities. There are more opportunities for other stakeholders to also get involved and provide data or support in these national systems.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much for all the panelists for really giving a very rich and varied picture of both the challenges, but also some really good concrete examples of ways that countries are moving forward, both your own and also experiences from around the world. And some ideas about how we can move forward in this. I think that's really given a good rounded picture of the different areas that can be worked on and the different issues that we need to look at in terms of building these kind of systems. So I'd like to finish there. If you have any links or so on that you can put in the chat, I saw that Ian and Johannes were also putting something in the chat. So if you have any links to the experiences, the examples that you mentioned, then I think that would be really useful for the participants. Unfortunately, we need to round off here because of the time constraints, but perhaps I can now pass over to the executive head of PARIS21, Johannes Jutting, just to share some thoughts on the way forward on the basis of what we've heard in the last 2 days. Johannes, over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Cassie. Thanks so much to all panelists. It was another great panel, I have to say. I've learned a lot. Thanks for sharing different perspective from a more global perspective to something very concrete, the ocean accounting, and so really very interesting. So I thought before sharing a few thoughts on the next steps, I was just thinking maybe it's good to step back again, like when we yesterday started the journey to talk about climate change data ecosystem. The presentation of Soni Kapoor was reminding us about I think he quoted the last IPCC panel report that came out just beginning of this week. And as you know, it's the third of a series of reports that the IPCC is putting together. And every time it's getting more sobering, and it's a bit frustrating to read it, but hey, we can't run away. We need to take note. And I think I was looking at some of the main messages again, and the story that also we see coming up is that we are currently on a pathway of 3 degrees increase in terms of the temperature by end of the century. That's, if we don't change, we will be going there. We need huge investments. I think the number they put out there is 1 trillion to have investment in green energy, in changing our production method. The good news, and there's also quite good news in this report, some countries are doing. They are successfully changing their production and development modes. But there's so many things more to be done, and we need to convince the policymakers to do so. To make now the right decisions and to invest the 1 trillion rightly, you need to have the data. You need to have the data, in particular coming from those countries who are most vulnerable. And this has been said very, very clearly. These are the poor countries in this world, low-income countries, small island and development states, where we have the biggest needs for changing production and development models, and where we have the biggest data scarcity. This doesn't work. So we definitely need to start changing this picture now. Now, from what I also take away, and of course, we as PARIS21 are quite happy that we can bridge different communities. So I was very sort of excited to see in our 2 days here that we could bring together people from more data analysis, people from ministries, of course, our home community, the statistical community, but also bridging to other parts, Financial Times, media, civil society, and other groups. And I think that's very important. We need to bring the data to the climate people. We need to bring the data to the climate change people. We cannot just sit in our own world and continue to talk to ourselves. We need to bring the data to them so that they can sort of relate to where we're coming from. So this is really very much needed. Now, 3 takeaways from a very biased takeaways through my own lens of being heading up this small secretariat sitting in Boulogne-Billancourt at the border of Paris, and it's called PARIS21. So let me share with you the 3 things that I take away where I see particularly a role for our community to help going forward. Now, the first point is the climate change data ecosystem. We were able to coin this term in the last couple of months through the help of many of you, and I wanted to thank everybody who helped thinking analytically, conceptually about a climate change data ecosystem. The paper is out, and that's something we are quite proud of, and that's something we believe can help to move from the what to the how. It can directly, I think Fernanda said it a couple of times, and Stefan as well. We know about the issues about funding, capacity development, interoperability, data stewardship, capacity development. This is not new. But I think the specific lens through institutional setup to how can we bring the different stakeholders together in a given country needs a new, fresh look. And seeing it through the lens of a climate change data ecosystem is a useful lens. Let me give you the example of if you are an agricultural minister in a small island developing countries, you see the climate changes coming. You need to change your agricultural policy from pricing policies, marketing policies, lots of extension services. You need to change this, and this would require data from classical data that would come possibly from the global level, but also in terms of temperature, in terms of water, in terms of those kind of things, but also in terms of more socioeconomic data, soil data, price data, and so on and so forth. So at some point, the data might be actually there, but we need to bring it together. And this can be helped through the climate change data ecosystem. Second point here is what I also learned is for us, I think a focus has to be on small island development states and low-income countries, vulnerable population. I think here we have a really urgent need. It's important to have these international reports out, the IPCC reports, which are basically for global monitoring. But we need to step up the effort internationally on climate change adaptation policies, climate change is happening right now, and it will happen in the coming years. So you need to help countries to formulate policies to adapt. And here we need a specific, in this whole bucket, a specific focus on adaptation policies and helping with this data for those kind of policies. This is very clear to me, and I think we should definitely have a focus on this one. And the last point, if I may, what next? I do think you are all invited to help us, the community, to think about this climate change data ecosystem further. This needs to be, I mean, we are at the beginning. We are still at the beginning. We have lots of good things that we can build on, but we also need to invent new things. We need to keep the conversation going within the statistical community, and Stefan kindly offered we can continue the conversation. We have the UNFCCC conversation. So we would be most excited to continue those conversations. But I think the most exciting thing will be to move to the country level and to develop country pilots. I think that's key, to learn from a couple of country pilots, how could a climate change data ecosystem in a given context look like, how it is today. Take a picture of the situation today, compare it with an analytical benchmark picture that we can all develop, and then think about how do you go from A to B, and what are the lessons learned? And can we scale up those lessons learned? Can we multiplicate this? And here I was very happy that Gabriel was suggesting from the IMF that PARIS21 could be helping with the coordination of those efforts. And we as a small secretariat, again, are very happy to do so, to help with this, of course, as a partnership effort from the whole PARIS21 family and community. So thanks again for this kind suggestion, and we stand ready to do so. So with this in mind, I see the time is up. I know you eventually all have to move on to other business. Let me just share a few words of thanks. I wanted to, first of all, thanks all those whom I can't unfortunately see, the attendees for the 2 days. We had 230 participants at the maximum yesterday. Today, 175. This is topping every kind of PARIS21 meetings. We do hope we can meet next year in person again, but the virtual ones allow for an inclusive participation, in particular from those countries that usually might have travel difficulties to come to Paris. So we are really very, very happy to have been able to bring in the Global South perspective to this meeting, which is so important for us. So thanks to the attendees. Of course, also thanks to my OECD technical colleagues and to the interpretation. I listened to the Spanish. Ivan, my Spanish is not yet as good as it should be. So I was listening to you in English, and that was wonderful. So thanks to interpretation. And last but not least, of course, to my team, for I think everybody was involved. Let me just call out a few colleagues who really made this time, who shouldered the biggest effort. First, I mean, it's Cassie and Karina who have been behind this from the beginning, from A to Z, thinking about the paper, preparing the concept note, and all these kind of work. Then my assistant Susan, who was also there, who was with many of you in contact. So a big thanks to her. And then on the technical side, Georgie with the whole Zoom setup and those kind of things. Magali helping with interpretation, and social media, Caroline and Sasha. So a big thanks to all of you. Thanks again. And with this, just maybe we can clap in the hands or make a last hello. And I wish you all a great rest of the day. And we will be in touch. Please visit our website. Please watch the video on YouTube and also listen to our podcast. There's a podcast coming out with Sony Kapoor as being interviewed. So there's lots of resources you can use to stay in touch. Thanks very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.